This episode of Digital Photography Cafe is brought to you by Focus Pyramid, the autofocus lens calibration tool for your camera, and by Daisy Grip, for a child's smile for a photographer's camera.
Welcome to the Digital Photography Cafe. I'm Trevor Current, your digital marketing guy.
And I'm Joseph Christina, your professional photographer.
So grab a latte, pull up a chair, and join us as we chat about the art and business of photography.
So hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Last week we talked about offset printing for photographers and how to edit Facebook comments. If you haven't listened to last week's show, I encourage you to do so. You can find it on iTunes or listen in your car through Stitcher Radio, or simply head over to our website, digitalphotographycafe.com, and listen online.
So Joe, we are back, episode 62.
62.
Feels like we were just doing this again.
I think we were. Yeah, I think we were. But that's all right. That's all right. Good news here. As we said last week, the video version is, of course, online through iTunes.
Very exciting.
Yep. You don't have to get it through our website. You can actually subscribe, and we encourage everyone to do so, please.
Yep. And you can also get it via regular RSS, too, so you don't have to go just through iTunes.
Right.
So if you've got a Zune or something else and you want to watch it on there,
exactly,
grab the RSS feed and download it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of applications for downloading podcasts and videocasts and whatnot on iPhones and iPads and everything else. So, RSS is all that you need.
Yep, that's all you need. Yeah, it's very cool. So, found this interesting thing this week. Are you familiar with Terry White? Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
He does a lot of like training stuff for Adobe, and he's involved in photography. He does tech reviews and stuff. He's got his own website. It's Terry White's Tech Blog. It's pretty good, really good stuff on there. I like a lot of what he's doing. But he put out this article, which was really cool, and it's kind of something that I never really thought much about. But all cameras have a shutter rating to them. How long the shutter is supposed to last before it craps out on you.
Yeah, supposed to is the key.
The key, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and a lot of times you just don't know how many shots you've taken. I mean, unless you're keeping track of your image numbering sequence and you've reached 9,999 and it flips back around to 1 and you go put a little check mark on your wall or something.
Yeah, a little notch in your belt or
put a notch in your belt. Yeah. So, so a lot of times we don't know. Now with Canon, it's a lot harder to find out this information.
Yeah, Canon sucks.
You really can't get to
I've been shooting Canon for years and years, and when it comes to this kind of stuff, I've tried to figure this out, and there are programs out there to do it. A lot of them are proprietary to Windows. I don't do Windows. And then some of them work, some of them don't work. The bottom line is it's just kludgy to try
the only way
out.
that you can really get an accurate data reading on this is if you send your camera into Canon for service.
Exactly.
They can tell you what your shutter rating is. So,
right.
With Nikon, so here's a really cool tip that he had, and I never really thought about it, to be honest with you, but it's really neat. So basically with a Nikon camera, you set your Nikon to shoot in RAW. And then just take one shot of anything. It doesn't matter.
Right.
He gave the example. He even shot it with no lens and the body cap on.
Right.
So,
right.
You don't need anything. So then what you do is you transfer the .nef file to your computer,
the RAW
and
file.
open it in Photoshop, or he said Bridge.
Sure.
So you could open it there. He said then go do a file info on it and head to the advanced tab.
Right.
And then you twirl down the little sub menu there under schema, and you will see the actual shutter count, which they call image number.
Right. So I guess you're actually looking into the XF data from the image, and it tells you inside there, right?
Right. Exactly. So I guess what's happening is the Nikon is writing to each image the consecutive number, and it's keeping track of it in the XF data that you're able to access in the raw file. Now, my understanding is that this doesn't work with JPEG. because it's just not saving the full EXIF data, I guess. So that's really cool. Like you said, Canon, you're kind of, it's a little bit harder to do. There are a couple websites out there, a couple apps, like you said. And you know what? We'll put a listing with some links in the show notes. So anybody that wants to kind of check out their Canon, get an idea of how many pictures they've made. Yeah. You can head over there.
Yeah, absolutely. A good use for this would be, let's say you're on eBay and you're buying a camera, and let's say you're buying, some type of Nikon, and let's say it's a D9, and you're like, well, how many, shutter, what is your shutter count? Because there's a limited number, and then after that, you're sending it in, and you're paying $150 to $200 to have that shutter replaced. And the number that they give you is never accurate. I've never seen one accurate. I mean, I've had 5Ds that, were done after like 60,000. And then I've had, some of them that go on to, let's say, 150,000. So, it's kind of hit and miss. So you could very easily, if you're buying a used camera, say, listen, how many shutter releases do you have on this camera? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, then you could very easily say, listen, just shoot a raw. Yeah. This is how you find out, send it back to me. And, they come back with, 49,000 shutter releases. Well, then at least you're, halfway there or quarter way there, whatever. And you can make a better determination on, let's say, the age of the camera, and then also the use of the camera. Was it like the grandma taking shots, at the beach, or was it a professional that was banging off, extreme load onto this body? So,
well, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the shutter rating is based on a lot of factors. I mean, not just, in ideal situations in the lab, and they've got the machine, banging away at the appropriate room temperature and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you're out shooting in a dusty environment, that's going to affect it. If you're out shooting in the cold weather, that's going to affect it. If you're shooting in extreme hot temperatures, that's going to affect it. So, I mean, there's really a lot that kind of comes into play. But you're right. I mean, at least if you know what the shutter usage has been, you can at least make a decision as to whether or not you want to buy that camera or the next person's camera.
Right. Exactly. You have one that shows as 80,000. You have another one that shows at 8,000. Well, you know what? I'll pay an extra $50 for the one that only has 8,000 releases on it. That's what I mean? That's just, just common sense. So anyway, some more information about smartphones, right? And the stats as far as usage, right? Which is very important to us photographers and how we create our websites, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and we're not big lovers of Flash websites, let's say. I mean, I can, we said before, I can respect the design. It may look pretty. It may be functional. But is it practical? And, as we've said, Flash websites just do not play nice on iPhones at all, iPads at all.
Yep.
And many of the other smartphones out there, Androids and what have you, it's kind of hit or miss, as to whether it plays nice. So I found these couple of stats that I found quite interesting and just wanted to share with everybody.
And I love stats, so let's hear them.
We love stats. Yeah, well, it helps to make our point. It really helps to reinforce what we're talking about. We're not trying to just pulling it out of our butt.
Yeah, and it gives like a pictorial representation of what we're talking about, so you can kind of get an idea.
That's right. So stats, let's go. 57% of smartphone users do a Google search on their phone every single day.
That's amazing. That's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, how many of those people are the brides potentially looking for a photographer?
Right.
I mean, out of all smartphone owners, there's probably a pretty fair percentage of people.
Sure.
80% of smartphone users don't leave home without their device.
Right.
I know I don't.
No, absolutely not. I feel lost. Can you imagine? Yep. I mean, you don't have the phone in the pocket. Now what do you do? You feel completely lost.
And 33% of smartphone users would give up their TVs before they would give up their smartphone.
I think that's an awesome stat. I love that.
Yeah.
33% will give up their TV over their phone. That really, that means a lot. That really does. Because TV forever used to be, the media of choice.
Right.
You go to TV to watch, to get your news, to get whatever. Whereas now it's what this is saying. 33% of the people are saying, you know what, I'm getting enough content right from my phone. or right from my iPad or whatever. So this kind of, kind of to backtrack into this a little bit, it is so important that our websites are mobile compliant, mobile friendly, very, that play very nice with different mobile devices. Because like we're saying here, people are finding you, right? They're finding venues, they're finding locations, they're finding photographers, they're finding, a chiropractor when they're driving around in the car, not when they're sitting
when they're
in
on
their house.
Lunch break, when they're, whatever, when they're hanging out while they're watching TV.
Yeah. And kind of to put a little, a little piece into this, which you need to keep in mind, which if you haven't done this, you need to do it. If, so many people, they put their phone numbers and their email address and they put a contact form and all of this stuff. Think about the mobile person that wants to contact you. Put your phone number not in a GIF file, not in a JPEG, not in a PNG. Put your number in text on the front page. So what this does is, like for example, on an iPhone, when you go to a website that has a phone number, it recognizes it as a phone number and it makes it clickable. If you click on it, it says, do you want to call this number? Now, this is nothing that you have to do on the back end of your website besides simply putting your phone number there in text format. The other thing that you could do is put your address there in text format. If they click
give people
on
the
it,
ability to add it to their contacts.
Add it to their contacts. But the other thing is it'll immediately open up a map and say, you could very simply say, click on here to get directions to there. And that's it, done. They don't have to type it in or nothing. So having your phone number and having your address on the front page somewhere, if you have a location that you want people to come to or a phone number that you want people to call, that will help you guys out a lot. Just go and do it. Do it today.
Absolutely.
Do it immediately.
Absolutely. I did find actually a little workaround where you can link a phone number to an image and it will be clickable.
Wow.
I tested it from the iPhone and I could actually click on the image and it would say, call this number.
Wow.
I'd be, yep.
So, do it. Do it.
Yeah, it works pretty good. I mean, it's a little bit of a thought process to figure out how to do it, but it's same effect. And that way you can kind of design a graphic even around your phone number as opposed to just using text.
Absolutely.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we got a really good question that came in through Twitter, but before we get into that question, let's go ahead and take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors.
Have you ever tried to photograph a child who was on the move and wouldn't settle down? A child who just wouldn't give your camera the time of day no matter what tricks you tried? If so, we have some great news for you. Introducing the Daisy Grip, your go-to tool for capturing a child's smile.
Just think of the Daisy Grip as your third hand. Just place it into your camera's hot shoe, insert the child's favorite toy or puppet, and let the smiles begin. Imagine the storytelling magic that you'll have at your disposal with a ferocious lion or a friendly monster sitting on top of your camera. For the ultimate attention getter, place your smartphone into the Daisy Grip and play the child's favorite cartoon.
With the addition of a Daisy Grip bracket, you can free up your hot shoe for a flash or wireless transmitter.
Let Daisy Grip put the space above your lens to work for you. Make this indispensable tool your new best friend. Head over to daisygrip.com/DPC to get the listener discount.
The Daisy Grip, for a child's smile, for a photographer's camera. So Joe, yes, as you said before the break, we got a question from Twitter this week.
And we love questions.
Yes, we do. And the person was asking about lenses for their camera. They were asking, what lens I would recommend for a specific shooting situation.
Right.
So, it's kind of an auditorium setting. I'm imagining like in a school, maybe there's a play going on type of thing. It was a, no real ambient light to speak of. You have your stage lighting. And she said that they would be about 15 feet away from the subject.
Right.
And she also said that she was using a Rebel T2i body, which, as we know, has a crop sensor of like 1.6.
Right.
So these are things that pieces of data you can kind of use when making suggestions or recommendations when figuring out, how to build your kit out.
Yeah. A T2i in an extreme low light situation, is going to be really, pushing it a little bit because of, it's good with noise control, but still noise will be an issue. ISO will be an issue. So
it's not going to be as good as a 5D Mark II or 3, but it's definitely going to be better than the old, 30s or probably even the 40. I would say.
Well, yeah, they're. I think they're pretty comparable. I mean, it's right around that range. But I mean, looking at it, I always tell people that they say where should I be with my ISO? I always say is where are you comfortable with the amount of noise that you're getting? Because as soon as you go, past 100, 160, 200, right around there, you're going to start getting some noise. Now, the question is the quality of the noise. Larger, full frame cameras, they produce more of like, a grain-like noise. The crop sensors, they start getting a little bit bright and blown out. Like you'll start getting color noise where you start seeing hot spots. Noise. And those are not very... I mean, no. I try staying away from that as much as possible. Of course, once you get into Lightroom, you can pull some of that out. There's a lot of stuff you can do. The bottom line is how much noise you're comfortable with. That's where I'd start out with ISO. And then after that, of course, you're going to look at the subject matter. Now, you're saying that they're on a stage. You're going to be lit only with stage light. You're looking at no ambient light in the room at all. Right. Maybe it's a ballet
now, stage
recital.
Light is really good. I mean, it's nice and bright, and in many cases, it's very high contrast.
It's actually too good.
Yeah.
And the problem with it usually is these spotlights are so bright that to pull any ambient out, let's say besides the performer, is very, very difficult because you're either going to blow out the performer, right, to be able to pull out some ambient so you can see what the background even looks like, or you're going to get the performer perfect and now the background's going to go to black. So, this kind of condition, I mean, is very difficult. You really, I mean, to do it right, you need some higher end equipment. Now, the bottom line between the full sensor, compared to a crop sensor, I mean, you have the latitude to play a little bit because it's recording a lot, it's a lot more pixels across. So for me, if you're going to be doing this type of photography, I would say definitely go with a full frame. But she does not have a full frame. She's doing with a crop. So now, what do you do? Now we're going to have to look at lenses, right? So you go into, your f-stop. Well, obviously, if you can, shoot this at 15 feet away, if you're just trying to get the performer, you could probably shoot with like a 50 because that'll end up at about an 85, somewhere right around there with the crop.
Right.
And, let's say shoot at 1.2, 1.4, or even get, as I call them, the toy lens, like a 1.8, very cheaply.
Which, as we've said time and time again, that little 50 millimeter 1.8 is a fantastic lens for $100.
Yeah. The other side of this is if you want to actually capture the entire scene at 15 feet away on a crop sensor, it's going to be difficult.
You got to go wide.
You need to go extremely wide, maybe down to 15 millimeter or 17 millimeter. There is a couple of lenses that I would say are my favorite in regards to that, but we'll cover that later on. But you would have to be down there 15, 17 millimeter to be able to get a wide enough range from that close. But the bottom line is to get a good picture. Now remember, the wider open you can open this lens to, the faster you can shoot. If you're trying to let's say it's ballet and you're trying to capture someone in midair, you're not going to be able to drag the shutter sitting at like a 15th or a 30th. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be blurred.
No.
And
that's where it goes back to what the subject matter is. Yes, if you're trying to shoot ballet and you want to catch a mid-flight jump, then you need a fast shutter. If you've got somebody that's standing on stage singing and moving very minimally, you could probably go with a little bit slower shutter.
Right. So, I mean, the idea here is know what you're trying to capture, and then you have to capture it accordingly. Now, having that fast, having let's say a 1.4, you could probably crank that shutter up if you to, let's say, 100th or a 125th if you don't mind at 800 ISO or 1250 or something like that.
Right.
As long as you don't mind the grain. And still get some really good shots. Because remember, most of these, she's talking about in an auditorium. Most of the time, flash photography is not allowed, period.
No, nor do you really want to do it. I mean, it's a distraction to the performers, especially if you're only 15 feet away and you got a big flash going off in their face. I mean, and as we know, you see the moms and dads like in the backs of the auditoriums with their little point and shoots and these tiny little flashes going off from, 100 feet away, and like it's going to do anything.
No, yeah. The flash range is like, 15 feet and they're at 150 and they're just flashing the guy's head, in front of them. And that's basically about it. So, I mean, if you're doing this professionally, I mean, you're going to be in the back of the auditorium with a 300 or so lens, with some lighting that's already there that you already know that's going to be there, and you'd set it all up beforehand and all this stuff. But if you're just up there up front, you really need to look at your glass and say, okay, is kit glass going to work for me as standard, or am I going to have to get some pro glass? And it really depends on, how deep your pocket is. The problem with the kit glass is usually it's varied. It's a variable aperture. So, you're either at, 3.5, and then all of a sudden the next shot you're at 5.6 based on the light, and you're just all over the place. And you can,
right.
I am very anal retentive. I want every one of my lenses are locked down, period. I don't want, I shoot manual. I just don't, I don't want this stuff moving. I want to tell the camera what to do. I don't want the camera to guess and then tell me what it thinks I should do. Right. So, I would say, stay away from the kit glass if you can. If you can afford it, get some standard glass, even if it's not, the name brand, but get something that has a fixed let's say a 2.8. A 2.8 is great. As long as it's fixed and it's not wandering and migrating around.
Yep.
At least you know what you're going to get, and you can control everything else. The other side of this is, let's say you're shooting sports photography. Right? Now everything changes a little bit. Now all of a sudden, chances are in the sports photography, you're going to be either outdoors or you're going to be somewhere where there's like better lighting for the most part.
There's going to be a lot more light. Sure. If they're doing sports, even if it's arena type stuff, basketball game or what have you, that place is flooded with light.
Right. And you have a little bit more latitude to play around with, and you don't need, such crazy glass. I'll put a caveat on that. Unless you're doing this professionally and you're bringing out the torpedo, and you're shooting 400 and 600 millimeters and you're trying to get stuff for Sports Illustrated, that's it. But if you're just, on a sideline, and you're at a hockey game, I mean, chances are you're going to have a good enough light to be able to shoot a kit lens. But anyways, kind of moving into this sports photography and frame rate, most of the time with sports photography, let's say you're doing motorcycles, right? And you're set up at a specific corner. These things are going by at, 100 plus. So at this point, all of a sudden, instead of worrying about, getting this glass that is specific to shooting low light, you have plenty of light coming in. But the caveat to this is you still want some fast glass there, because you want to capture this at the fastest shutter speed that you can possibly get it. And chances are you're going to be motoring through it. So you're going to be,
you need to be able to do burst shooting too.
Yeah. Sure. So it's, the whole, spray and pray type of thing. So, you're locked up on a corner, you pre-focus on a specific leaf, that's in that corner, and then they come around and you're like,
and you're banging out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Shots.
And, so this is a different method. The other side of that too is, if you're doing that, what do you need? It's more important to have a really fast writing CF card than anything.
Because you're banging out a lot of large megapixel images, especially if you're shooting RAW, that need to get saved to that card quickly. So you need a fast card.
And there are some.
Yeah, I know this Lexar card, right?
Yeah.
Is this a newer card? Like 150 megabytes per second write speed?
Is that crazy? Nuts. Yeah, you can go up to, I think, 32 or 64 gigabytes of 100 megabyte per second dumps on these cards. I mean, that's a lot.
That's amazing. That's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I have a 45 megabytes per second that I got for shooting video. For 1080p.
Right.
And that's more than enough. I mean, that's overrated for you really definitely, you only need like 32, I think, or 35, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought that was extremely fast, but I mean, looking at these, man, 100 megabytes per second.
Yeah, 150, and it's. But see, this is the stuff, and this gets into the gear and knowing, your subject matter, and not buying gear that you really don't need. Too many people do that. They're like, oh, I need the best of this, I need the best of that, and you need the best. Well, you know what? Sometimes you don't. And here's a perfect example. The same person who's doing is a portrait photographer. He doesn't need 150 megabyte per second, card that can burst, 30 frame, just, you don't need that. And 32 and 64 gig. I mean, they could probably get by with a 4 gig card and do an entire headshot session, you know?
And you're using different lenses. You don't need those big, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 torpedo lenses or more.
Right.
Depending on the glass you get. You're using your standard portrait lenses for those situations. So, yeah, I mean, that really, your subject matter, the conditions, I mean, that all determines what gear you need.
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked about this lens many times in the past, and I just want to kind of reiterate it. I call it my toy lens. I have, a ton of Canon glass, Minolta glass, a lot of glass over the years, from medium format to just all the different 35s that I have, metal bodies and all the rest. One of my favorite lenses, costs, it was about $89, and it's a 1.8 Canon 50, fast 50. And it's made out of plastic. It's like what you would consider junk,
Yeah,
and it produces absolutely beautiful images, and it costs next to nothing. So it's like, know what your subject matter is and buy the lenses and the cards and the flash and everything according to what you're going to be doing with it. Don't go and just go buy all kinds of junk and you have it piled up and you look over and you look like a collector instead of a photographer. I mean, I did that for many, many years, and you end up with just a ton of stuff, and the majority of it just sits there and collects dust.
And doesn't get used. That's right.
Absolutely. That's absolutely. Right. So, but anyways, I kind of want to, we're talking about different, pieces of kit to buy and what not to buy. I would like to kind of give a couple of recommendations for different situations. So, before we get into that, let's go ahead and take one more quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into some recommendations.
Cool.
Are you frustrated with slightly out of focus images when you know your autofocus spot was dead on? It's simply not your fault. From manufacturer to manufacturer, and even lens copy to lens copy, there are slight variances to the exact spot where light is being focused onto the sensor. Finally, there's a product that allows you to compensate for those variances and make sharper images immediately. Focus Pyramid, the autofocus lens calibration tool, is an absolute must for every photographer. If you want to make the sharpest images possible, then you need to take control over your camera's focusing system. With the Focus Pyramid, you can calibrate all of your lenses on your lunch break. The Focus Pyramid makes lens calibration quick and easy at an affordable price. So give your lenses a new lease on life and take your photography to the next level. Head over to focuspyramid.com/DPC and get an additional 10% off just for being a show listener.
So, Joe, we want to talk about some recommendations for different lenses to go with your bodies, the different bodies and stuff, whether you're full frame or crop sensor. So, we always want to base your kit decisions on the focal length that you need.
Right.
And you want to get lenses that are going to complement each other. You don't want to get a lot of overlap in magnifications, Right. So why don't you go through and kind of give us some of the lenses, some of the suggestions that you have based on the shooting that you've done?
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I mean, you don't want to overlap too much because you're wasting money unless the overlap is for a specialty lens. And then I would say, okay, overlap is fine. Perfect example is, let's say, a 90 or a 100 millimeter macro. Well, yeah, you might be overlapping another lens that you have, but it's a macro lens. And that macro lens is going to be specific for a lot of this close work that you're going to do.
Right.
I could talk about that a little bit later too, how you can kind of get around macro lenses. But anyways, the bottom line is if you're looking, if you do have overlap, make sure it's a specialty. Maybe it's a fisheye. maybe it's a tilt shift lens, maybe it's whatever it is, but it needs to be a specialty lens. If not, you really want to kind of get the meat and potatoes to cover the focal length that you're trying to capture. If you're a portrait photographer and that's all you do, well, you really don't need a 15 millimeter wide angle lens or a fisheye, and you sure don't need a 300 plus millimeter bazooka.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So, just looking at lenses, to give you a little bit of idea, I recommend picking up a nice wide lens. Let's say if it's on a crop sensor body, 15 millimeters, 17 millimeters is pretty good. You can get them even wider, but you start paying a lot.
Yeah, no, and that's really a good width. I mean, I shoot with a crop sensor now. I also have shot with the full frame as well. But yeah, I mean, a 50 millimeter on the crop pulls you up around the 85-ish, let's say. And that's fine for doing those portraits. You can kind of get in a little bit tighter. You can be a little bit more intimate with them and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, if you're looking to shoot landscape or what have you, and it may be a little too much. So having that wide angle, having a 15 millimeter would be really nice.
Yeah.
On a crop.
Yeah. And once again, if you can get a 2.8 or something that is a constant instead of a variable, just, go with a constant. Don't start getting into this stuff that's migrating all over. Just, you're buying the stuff, buy it once, but buy the stuff that you need and buy it that it's going to stay with you for 10 years, that you're not going to be like, oh, I need to sell this. Don't bother. I always tell people when they're buying cameras, don't buy the kit at Costco, at BJ's, at Sam's Club, at whatever. Don't buy that, because then you get, buy the body by itself and then buy a lens that you need, because you're paying for that extra lens. Even if you're only paying a couple $100 for it, don't do it. Why bother? You're go with, unless that is some lens that you specifically want for who knows why. The next lens after the wide angle, I would say, is your Fast 50. I mean, you can do a 35 millimeter, a fast 1.8, 2.0, 1.4, which is fine. But the 50, I love the Fast 50. It's just a really nice lens. Like you're saying, on a crop, it's right around 80, 85. On full frame, which that's all I shoot, that's going to be the straight 50. Beautiful lens. It does a great job. And at 1.8 or 1.4 or even 1.2, if your pockets are deep enough and your back is strong enough to carry the beast, then of course you want it. If you can afford to go that way. The next lens I would say is a 24-70. I don't care if you're Nikon, Canon, it doesn't matter. 24-70. You can get them from the manufacturer, or you can get them third party. Great lens. After the 24-70, I would pop right into a 70-200. So you see what we're doing.
Extends that focal range.
Exactly, and you're seeing what we're doing. We're doing 24-70, and then we're doing 70-200, and then for me, I would go all the way up to like a 300. Because if you're going to go long, you're going to want to go long. Period. And this is the case even with crop sensors, because at 24 on a crop, you're not too bad. You're okay. On a crop sensor, I would say, and if you don't want to get the 24-70, go with like a 17-55, like a Tamron or something like that. That's a perfect lens. You can go a little bit wide, and you can get in a little bit tight. That is the lens for you. 2.8, beautiful lens. So that's kind of like that to me gives you a good start. Now, we're not talking about cheap here. This is a lot of money. Where you can save is, for example, on the 70-200. On the 70-200, you can do a 2.8, right? Or you could do a 4.0. The 4.0 is actually a little bit sharper for the most part. They've always have been. But of course, in low light, you would want the 2.8. The thing is the 2.8 is heavier. It's like $1,000 more. I mean, there's a lot of negatives and a lot of positives. But if you want to do something that you can afford, and you can't afford the big $2,500 price tag of a 2.8, then go with the 4.0. You'll be very, very happy with that lens. I still shoot 70-200 for portraits. I like it. I like the compression. I like the way it looks, but I always end up shooting my Fast 50 on a model, even though the rule of thumb is you don't really use that to shoot portraits. For some reason, I get really good results with it. And sometimes, and like you were talking about being intimate with your subject sometimes pulls stuff out of them that you can't get out of them when you're sitting back there with the big torpedo, with the big
when you're back far from them. Exactly.
Right. So even though, let's say it's a little bit, let's say you're not getting as good of an image, but the mood and the feel just, it helps, let's just say, to pull it out when you're actually intimate. And that's everyone's preference. Some people like to be further away. Some people like to be up close. The other thing with that, I was talking about that macro lens, the 90 or 100 macro, beautiful lens. I have a Tamron 90 that is probably one of my favorite lenses. And it's not the Canon 100 that everyone, the Canon lens. It's a Tamron. I love that lens. That thing is so bleeding sharp, razor sharp. It's unbelievable. Once that lens was calibrated, it's dead on, and you can see just hairs growing out of pores. I mean, it's so tack sharp.
Right.
I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Now,
you probably see more than what you really want to.
Well, yeah, and that's the side thing. So for me, I like to get more, and if I want to reduce it, I could reduce it. I don't want to start out with a blurry image and then try to make it sharp after the fact, because it never happens.
Exactly.
You could.
Yeah, I mean, then you can go the low cost route and maybe just get like some extension tubes.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're not as good as getting a lens with the magnification that you really need, but they do give you an option.
Yeah, extension tubes are a great low-cost way. I mean, you can get, for a couple $100, you can probably get 2 or 3, no names, extension tubes. The only thing that, and they will produce the same type of image as a straight macro lens would, and then you could continue to use your standard lens, whatever you have. So they work well, but the only thing is you want to know is with these extensions, with these tubes, you lose f-stop, you lose light. So, with some of them, you do like a 2x and you're losing like 3 stops of light. Well, if it's a product, shot, you can introduce more light. But if you're in an environment where you have a set amount of light and you don't have any more, well, now all of a sudden you're going to be sacrificing light. That means you're going to have to, pull up your ISO, or you're going to have to drag the shutter a little bit longer. You're going to have to do something to try to get to get everything in line. And, of course, then you have third-party glass in comparison to manufacturer. You can buy, let's say, a Nikon piece of glass, which is fantastic, or a Canon piece of glass. But you can buy a Tamron, you can buy a Sigma, you could buy some other no names off eBay. And, you
just got to look at what you're getting. And
exactly.
If you're buying new, you got to look at the warranties on them, replacements. Should you break a glass, or, something happens to it, you need to get it fixed.
Right.
And you're kind of in a situation, where you've got a gig and you need that lens, and maybe they can get you a loaner. Definitely look into those things when buying third party.
Right. How's their support? Do they support you, or they're like, no, I don't know, sorry, you're.
Yeah, we don't offer that type of support on these lenses. It's more on a case by case. We heard that one time.
We have actually heard that doing an interview with one of these companies.
Kind of shied us away from that company.
Yeah, we'll leave that company unnamed. Yeah. So, and
I'm definitely of the feeling, try before you buy. There's a lot of rental places out there now. I'm sure there's local places. Of course, you have borrowlenses.com. Definitely, if you want to, if you've got a gig coming up and you rent a couple different lenses, try them out, see what you think of them, see how you like the images, and you know what? If they're producing the way you want them to, then go out and make the purchase. But it's sure of a heck of a lot cheaper to rent than it is to go buy a bunch of glass and then be like, that really wasn't the lens I needed. And like you said, then you have all these lenses and they're just sitting there collecting dust.
Right. And you just never use them. In regards to cost, I mean, if you pick up I like to stay with the manufacturer lens unless you really know that a third party is good at that specific lens. But sometimes the thing with buying your manufacturer's glass is, number one, of course, you have a good warranty with it. Number two, I mean, they make a ton more of them. So chances are their QC is better, their quality control is better. Right. There's a lot that goes into it. And if you're a pro and you're out in the field and you're trying to get a shot and now something breaks, I mean, you should be out there with a replacement anyways, but how about if you don't have it, you really want, you are dependent on that gear. So if you are an emerging pro, someone that will be going pro in the near future, stick with the quality stuff right out the gate, and you'll
maybe
do
buy
yourself
less
a favor.
of it, but what you buy quality, and what you don't have, rent for the occasion.
Exactly.
Because as you're coming up, as you're emerging to become a professional, your gigs are probably going to be fewer and farther between. And as you get these specialty, jobs that come in where you might need a certain lens or whatever, just go rent it.
Right.
And if you find yourself doing a lot more of that type of work, and maybe that's an area you want to specialize in, then go buy it.
Yeah. Perfect example of that would be doing, let's say, real estate or some type of landscape that, that you might need a tilt shift or something. That's an expensive lens, or extremely wide, fast glass, wide angle lens, which is going to cost you, a lot of beans. So, so the glass that I always would recommend is your glass, your Nikon, your Canon, Sigma, Tamron, Zeiss. Some are better than others. If the caveat here is if you're going to be doing video, okay, there's now video glass that's coming out, so you want to keep that in mind. You can go with a video, specific lens. They are making them now. But if you don't want to go that route, I always recommend Zeiss. Zeiss glass, that German.
Zeiss is nice.
Zeiss is nice. I mean, German optics is German optics. I mean, these are ground glass that these people are very anal retentive, and this stuff is to tolerances that the major manufacturers really. I personally think that it's better. I mean, there's always a debate, but if you're doing video, I mean, you get some fast Zeiss glass, you're going to pay double, but you have an amazing piece of glass, and that will last for the body you have and 5 more bodies that you purchase down the road. So you're going to have this.
I could see that if you're doing cinematography,
right?
If you're shooting commercials, if you're shooting short movies or what have you, I could see spending the money on the best glass you can get.
Sure.
But if you're shooting wedding videos or demo videos or something like that, I don't know, spending that kind of money on glass, I think I would probably just stick with manufactured glass.
Yeah, manufactured glass is more than sufficient.
Yeah.
So, kind of to kind of bring it all back together like we always do, when it comes to glass and, bring it back to the question, buy what you need for the specific project or the niche that you are currently working in or working towards. Don't go and buy all the best for everything, because you might not need it. If you don't need to shoot macro, don't buy a macro lens. Buy an extender and you're done. It's very cheap in comparison to buying the glass. And the same thing, if you're not, you're doing a lot of long range stuff, you don't need to buy a big, wide angle lens. So, buy what you need, but buy quality stuff right away. I would say stay away from the kit if at all possible.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Great information and what seemed to be a fairly simple question when asked. We find that it really, there's so much more to it.
And we can go on and on for 2 more hours, but
we really could, but we won't.
No, we won't,
because it is that time.
Yes,
so
it is.
Thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. And if you have any questions or want a long-winded answer, definitely send us a message through our website at digitalphotographycafe.com or head over to Twitter at dphotocafe. Joe, if people want to ask you a question, how's best for them to reach you?
After all that, they probably say, I don't want an answer.
Do we really want that answer?
They have to rewind, play. So anyways, you can find me over at the website, alluremm.com, at Twitter, at Joseph Christina, and that's Christina without an H. on Facebook. That's facebook.com/AllureMM. And finally on Google+. You can go to g+jc.com.
Great. And you can keep up with me on Twitter. It's @TrevorCurrent, or at our other Twitter account. It's @CurrentPhoto. And of course, check out our website at currentphotographer.com and facebook.com/currentphotographer.
So, all right, Trev, we are out of here. Once again, another show is in the can. I'd like to thank the listeners for their continued support. If you enjoy the show, we encourage you to subscribe for free in iTunes or via RSS to have them delivered automatically to your computer, iPhone, iPad, or whatever. And don't forget to subscribe to the video. If you're listening on the go, fear not. Everything that we covered during this week's show can easily be found in our show notes at our website, digitalphotographycafe.com. Once again, keep your questions and comments coming, and we'll talk to you next week.